To hold I'd like to say one more thing about Zion Adar, about the 7th of Adar, to all of you who are involved in the Chevra Kadisha and to all of us who are here, that this idea that the Chevra Kadisha had the day off, so to speak, because God handled Moses' burial, has been going on, has been practiced for centuries now. And let's just take a moment and reflect on the fact that there are communities all across the country who are involved in this, in some kind of recognition of Zion Adar. Do you want to see where did Jason go? So there are communities all across the country right now that are involved in the recognition of Zion Adar, and throughout the centuries there are communities that observe this day. So we're here in Boulder, but in some ways, if we can almost meditatively realize we can connect with all people across the country, all around the globe, and then in cultures from Eastern Europe and from Central Europe and in Sephardic cultures, all around the past hundreds of years, and that we're part of this morphogenetic field, this vibratory field of people who have taken care with a certain kind of loving respect of those folks and have been involved, if you will, Jason used the word soul guiding, in not only preparation of bodies, but also in transiting of souls to the other side. And I'd like to share with you a little bit about how I got involved in this whole topic of life after death, at least as far as I know from this lifetime. The story goes back when I was 21 years old. I was spending time with my good friend from high school and from college. At that point, okay, I think we're ready to go. I was spending time with my I was spending time with my friend, and we were actually cooking a meal. I had a date coming over to my house, and he helped me cook a meal. And then it was Saturday evening, and he was from an Orthodox family, so I got to go see my father and say Shabbos at the end of Shabbat. And we said goodbye. And I had company that night, and we actually went out. And at 2 o'clock at night, I was walking on the streets of Montreal. I didn't have to go home and relieve a babysitter, and it was a full moon. And I said to the friend I was with, I said, you know, there's something very auspicious about this full moon. I don't know what it is, but there's something very auspicious about the full moon. I went home, I went to sleep, and about 4:30 in the morning, the phone rang telling me that this friend of mine who had been with me earlier in the evening had been killed by a car accident. And he was being ID'd in the morgue around 2 o'clock in the morning. He was driving in a Citroën Maserati on the Trans-Canada, and he wrapped himself around an embankment. And so, if at that point, very early on, I had a sense of connection with him. And I remember we came home from the cemetery. The cemetery was like Mount Pleasant Park. There was nothing pleasant about burying a 21-year-old guy in the middle of a cold Montreal winter. But even then, I was wondering, like, is he here? In the middle of the Shiva, I went home to my house, because I'd stayed with his family during the Shiva. I went home to my apartment, and the food that we had cooked was in the fridge. And I was like, is he there? You know, his energy was in the food. You know, when I tried to get some understanding of that question within the Jewish context, it was embarrassing that nobody had anything to say. I mean, this was the early 70s. I had already had a degree in religious studies. I had studied with the gurus. My guru was Swami Meshugananda, and some of you know him, right? And so the Indians, the Tibetans had something to say about afterlife. There was the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and the Jews said, well, you know, when somebody dies, go sing them Yiddish love poetry. Or how many of you heard this one? Judaism believes in life and the living, the here and the now. We don't really believe in the afterlife. Put your hand up. How many of you heard that? Right, so if we don't believe in the afterlife, I don't really have much to say to you, and it's going to be a very short talk tonight, right? So I was fortunate enough to meet Reb Zalman, and he said, "Oh, Afterlife, you want to learn something about Afterlife? So go look here and here and here." And in fact, what he did was he pointed me into the pre-modern Jewish world. Not the modern Jewish world that attempted to be rationalist, but the pre-modern Jewish world of Isaac Bashevis Singer and the Hasidic masters for the Judaism of the 1800s and earlier. There was never any question about a life after death. And so what I'm going to do with you tonight is share a little bit of what I extracted. I spent 10 years reading everything I could on life after death. I originally had to study with the Tibetan Book of the Dead because it helped illuminate some of the Jewish stuff, which was not as easy to track down. But Naomi, as a landsman, I used to go sit on the cafes of Park Avenue at midnight on Saturday night reading death liturgy just to keep myself sane, because I was, I was doing that. And so you didn't put it in publicity. You didn't tell them. We'll time travel. Right? Imagine we could time travel back to the world of the Kabbalists, the Jewish mystics of the 12th and 16th century in Spain and stuff like that, and interview them. So what do you have to say about life after death? Well, the transcription of the interview is already in your hands in the texts that they wrote. So we're going to look at those texts. I'm going to share with you in a minute a Hasidic story, because Hasidism, which was a later kind of mystical revival of Judaism, where if Kabbalah was more of a metaphysical movement and not as populist, Hasidism took ideas of Kabbalah and brought it to the masses. In 1900, the nephew of the Gera Rebbe, and Gera was one of the great Hasidic dynasties, the nephew of the Gera Rebbe sat in the Polish parliament, which says to me, that was a mainstream movement. It wasn't just a kind of, if we think of Hasidim as like the Jewish Amish, sort of live in Borough Park in Brooklyn, but in its time it very much was a mystical movement, and a mass movement. So Hasidism takes ideas of Kabbalah and communicates them through stories. So what we're going to do in the next hour or so is I'm going to share with you a Hasidic story in a moment, and we'll talk about some Kabbalistic concepts, and then that's the what. What does Judaism have to say about life after death? And we're also going to address the so what. So how does that transform the way we think about the Jewish rituals of funeral and burial and Shiva and Kadisha and Yizkor and Yortzeit? And for those of you who need simultaneous translation, I promise you I will deliver that as we get to it. So, to start, the notion that Judaism does not believe in an afterlife is very much of a product of the Enlightenment. It's not the whole picture of Judaism. And when I wrote my book, I had this sentence that said, Jews have always believed in life after death. And the person who edited it said, you can't say that. Do Jews believe in life after death? Some do and some don't. But does Judaism believe in life after death? Absolutely. So I want to say the following. I am not selling belief. Okay? Because sometimes I sit in a conservative congregation and there's some guy sitting in the front row going like this. Okay, buddy, I don't believe. Now let's start talking. So I will sell the book, by the way, but I'm not selling belief. Because if you say I don't believe, and I say believe, we're in an adversarial relationship. And I'm not interested in that. But I do want to say this is what's in the tradition, and leave it up to you to do your own meaning making in terms of how that fits in with your own view of the world. Because I know I'm not only talking head stuff, because invariably mortality is built into the human condition. And we have all in various ways dealt with either living with death or living with dying. And so it behooves us to ask the question, what's it really all about, and what do we understand about afterlife? Okay, so that's where I want to go with tonight's conversation. Okay, so I want to start by sharing with you a story, a Hasidic story of the afterlife journey of the soul. And I'll tell a story and I'll talk about the story after. Okay, so this is a story told of Reb Elimelech of Blazhensk. Elimelech of Blazhensk was like one of the great Hasidic masters. And In his lifetime, he had a friend who was a Torah scholar, and his friend came to him and said, I don't know why it is, but my time to leave the world is rapidly approaching. So Reb Elimelech, he says to Reb Elimelech, do me a favor. He says, yeah, sure, what can I do? He says, could you educate my son in the ways of the Jewish people and take care of him? So Elimelech says, sure, I'll do that, but on one condition. On one condition, the guy's dying. What kind of condition you make with a dying man? He says, I will educate your son and take care of him, provided you come back and tell me what it's like on the other side. So they shake, it's a gentleman's agreement, and you know, Reb Elimelech does everything he can to educate the son, sends him to all the great yeshivas, come time to a bar mitzvah, there were 2 bands at the bar mitzvah. You know, he really does this with full integrity right through up to the time of the wedding, because in this culture, if you're going to educate a young book or a young man, you're also going to arrange for a shidduch, going to arrange marriage, marry him off. Whatever, they said she had a master's degree, had been to the orthodontist. You know, like he fulfills his part of the bargain fully. Comes time for the afternoon of the wedding, the groom's family is there, the bride's family is there, and Reb Elimelech was nowhere to be seen. You know, this was a problem. I mean, the guests were getting fetchy, the hors d'oeuvres were getting cold, and they didn't know where the rabbi was. You know, this could be a problem. They wait an hour. They wait 2 hours. After 2 hours, they go, they send somebody to his study. His door is closed. They peek in the keyhole. The Rebbe is meditating. Now, you would know, and you would know that if the Rebbe is meditating, nobody would disturb them under any circumstances whatsoever, right? So finally, after 3 hours, the Rebbe Elimelech, they come, they do the wedding. Oh, I forgot to tell you, you have a part in the story. Right? At the end of the wedding, they put down the glass, they break the glass, and they cry out, "Mazel tov!" You can do much better than that. They put down the glass, they break the glass, and they cry out, "Mazel tov!" Right. So then, Reb Elimelech gets up to address the guests. Now this is the point where I have to knock on the table like this, but I realize I shouldn't do it over there in case, you know, we bring somebody back up. So he gets up to address the guests. He says, I suppose you're wondering where I was. Let me tell you a story. So he proceeds to tell the guests the story of the agreement he had made with the groom's late father. And he said, here, I fulfilled my part of the bargain, and he hadn't fulfilled his part of the bargain. So I was going to wait until he shows up. I'm sitting here meditating, and I hear, Elimelech, Chaim, is that you? What was it like? He said, the moment of death was absolutely painless. It was like taking hair out of milk. And I could see all the people standing around, and they're crying, and they're shrieing, and I go, stop, I'm here. But they could neither hear me, nor see me. I figured, you know what, they made a mistake. It'll be all okay. Beware on this one. I could see the Chevra Kadisha standing around and preparing my body. And I tried and said, I'm here. But they were all so busy making sure they had all of their details right that they didn't even notice that I was around. So I said, you know what? They'll bury me, I'll come back, and I'll explain what happened, and it'll all be okay. So the procession goes out to the cemetery and comes back and leaves, and now I know I have this burning passion. I have to get back home, and I'm start digging furiously out to get home, and it's starting to thunder and lightning, and maybe no, you know what? Maybe I should stay here. No, I have to go, and it's thundering and lightning, and I'm digging quickly to get out, and I have to get across a raging. Maybe I should stay. No, don't go. No, I don't stay. No, go, stay. Don't go. I get so confused, and I cry, help! And all of a sudden, I see. I see before my eyes this great being of light. And this being of light says, don't you know? You're no longer in the world of confusion. You've entered the universe of truth. And I see before my eyes a panoramic vision of every single deed I have ever done in my life. And I realize I now am to stand for judgment. And I wait, and the judgment comes down that basically I've been a God-fearing man. Basically I've tried to serve my Creator. I don't enter into Gehenna, purgatory. But since there are ways in which I could have more fully fulfilled my destiny, more fully served my Creator, I don't enter into Gan Eden, the heavenly Garden of Eden. So what's going to happen to me, I ask? So I'm assigned a resting place in between Gehenna and Gan Eden, where on one hand I see all the torments of Gehenna and my soul is cleansed of any further defilements, and on the other hand I see the lofty heights of Gan Eden and my soul ascends to higher and higher levels of knowing and being. And there I stay. Now it says in Jewish tradition that on Shabbat all souls are released from Gehenna. Shabbat is a taste of the world to come. Came the first Shabbat, I entered into Gan Eden, and it was fantastic. It was sublime. It was blissful. It was delightful. Shabbat ends. The messenger from the heavenly tribunal shows up and says, come on, you have to go to your resting place in between Gehenna and Gan Eden. And I said, forget it. I like it here. He says, no, you have to go. He says, you know what? You go to the heavenly tribunal and you tell them, I studied Torah with the holy Reb Melech of Lezhensk. I should be able to merit to stay in Gan Eden. So the messenger of the heavenly tribunal goes and comes back and says, yes, it has been deemed on high that you shall merit your place in Gan Eden eventually. But it's also known that in your lifetime you made a promise, and until you fulfill that promise that you made to Reb Melech of Lezhensk, you can't rightfully take your place in Gan Eden. So Reb Melech is at the wedding and he's explaining this to all the guests. He's telling the story. He says, so I said to him, come on, let's go. We have a wedding to go to. He said, I've tarried so long, I can't wait a second longer. So he said, you go to the wedding and you tell everyone there the story and ask them to make a l'chaim and to tell everyone else they know the story and to make a l'chaim on my behalf. And in telling the story, to tell them to tell everyone they know the story, and to keep telling everyone they know the story, and making a l'chaim. So I want to say, l'chaim, 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 and I share with you that story exactly as I heard it. So, that is a template of the afterlife journey. Okay, one way to think about afterlife is like this. While you're alive, you're here, you pull the plug, ain't nothing happening, you're dead. That's one model. Another model is while you're alive, you're here. When you're dead, you're over in heaven. Or for some, there's the hell door for the Jews. I mean, there's whatever, but it's a binary model. The Kabbalistic model is very different. While we are alive, we're an amalgam of multiple energies and potentialities. Okay? Let me just do this, and then you can look at the chart in retrospect, because I feel like you're with me. So while we're alive, we're an amalgam of physicality, right? Check it out on House of Chairs. Comfortable, you're hungry, you're tired, right? We all have our physical being. There's emotionality, we have feeling states. I'm looking around, people sort of look in a good mood. Today was a warm day, the sun stayed out a little later. You seem to, if you don't know each other, people kind of generally like each other. There's a good feeling vibe here. Then there's another part of us that's the mind. Sort of mental, cognitive. It's cognitive, but it's more than that. The cognitive mind is like, hey, I think this guy knows what he's talking about. I'm not sure, maybe, so like there's that mind. But then there's a part of the higher mind where imagine we could go into darkness and just have a big screen of shots from the Hubble telescope. And I'd ask you to contemplate what that means. The place where we contemplate the beginning of the mystery of what it means to be alive and the sense of the grandeur of the cosmos and the universe. That's the mind, but in a sense that's the higher mind that kind of grasped it, or for those of you who remember Heinlein, you sort of grok the mystery in that moment. So there's that part of ourselves. And then there's another part that's essence, that's spirit, that Reb Zalman says, talks about, he quotes Meister Eckhart, the eye with which I see God and the eye with which God sees me is the same eye. See, here we're all in our diversity and our multiplicity, but at some other level, there's a place where we're all connected with one. And we each have that part of our being, at least in the Kabbalistic model, we're all of that. So we'll come down from the realm of spirit to the realm of mind to the realm of emotion to the realm of physical body. So when the physical body dies, a whole other series of working through all of those multiple potentialities of who we are unfolds. Okay? So now to say that I'm not just making this up, I want to ask Reb Victor to read us a text over here from this, where's the pages we're looking at? The three levels of the soul. By the way, all my charts start on the bottom and go up, because I sort of start at the lower levels and go to the higher levels. Okay? That's my eccentricity, I've confessed. But we're on page 1, the three levels of the soul.
There are three levels which comprise the soul. Therefore the soul has three names: Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama. Nefesh is the lowest of all. Ruach is the power of sustenance, which rules over the Nefesh. It is a higher level than the Nefesh, sustaining it throughout as it is filled. Neshama is the highest power of sustenance, and rules over all, a holy level, exalted above all.
Okay, so the Zohar is a mystical commentary on the Torah written in 12th century Guadalajara, Spain. So what I did was I took a little bit of Zohar and a little bit of transpersonal psychology and put it in the blender and let me go through that. There's actually 5 levels of the soul, but if you look on the graphic on the left, Nefesh is the bioenergetic field, vitality, or for the yogis in the room, it's the pranic body. Ruach is the emotional energy field, or the emotion. Neshama is the higher mind, the mental energy field. And the words for Chaya Yechida are universal self and oneness. The rabbis actually wrote more about the lower realms because they were ethicists. They weren't predominantly metaphysicians. You'll see, I'm going to end up talking more about the lower realm because the rabbis were not so interested in the cosmic connection as much as living a good life as human beings. And so that's really what we're doing. So somebody else want to read the post-mortem fate of the soul, and this is just by way of overview, and then we're going to, I don't know, you can't talk about getting into the meat of the matter when you're talking about afterlife. Maybe the tofu of the matter, the spirit of the matter. Somebody else, can you feel Shakespearean? The post-mortem fate of the soul.
Nefesh remains in the grave until the body is decomposed and turned into dust, during which time it flits about in this world, seeking to mingle with the living and to learn their troubles. And in the hour of need, it intercedes for them. It wanders about the world and beholds the body, which was once its home, devoured by worms and suffering the judgment of the grave.
Chibut HaKevin. We're going to come back to that, but keep going.
Ruach is purified in Gehenna, whence it goes forth, roaming about the world and visiting its grave. After 12 months, the whole is at rest, the body reposes in the dust, and the soul is clad in its luminous vestment. Neshama. Neshama attends at once to her place, the region from whence she emanated, Upper Gan Eden, and for her sake the light is kindled to shine above. She never again descends.
Okay. So does the word bardo mean anything to anybody? You know, is there a Buddhist in the room? You know, I need to ask that question. So the word that the Buddhists use, bardo, is best translated as a transit state. Okay, so what we have here is a model of the soul goes through a number of different states of transition. So now you can go to your chart for a second, but here's the phases of the afterlife journey. The first part I call physical separation is Chibut HaKever, is separating the body out, separating out from the body. That has very profound implications for Chevra Kadisha, and we need to talk about that. The next part is emotional purgation. There's no eternal damnation in Judaism. Whereas St. Augustine and the St. Augustine and the rabbis were contemporaries, and St. Augustine went eternal damnation, the rabbi said there is a 12-month process of purification of the soul. There's another phase called Gan Eden, intellectual contemplation. It's a sense of seeing God, seeing the one, seeing the grandeur of God. That's sort of like all the heavenly stuff that you know, minus the Hallmark card of little angels, right? But it's there. And then there's another place where one unifies back with the divine. So it's whereas in the Buddhist model, it's 3 stages. The Kabbalistic model is 4 stages. It probably has the peaceful deities and the wrathful deities are Gehenna and Gan Eden. So, physical separation, emotional purgation, intellectual contemplation, and spiritual unification. So, let's do something called Chibuta Kever. Go into the story with me and just put some words to what is that emotional tenor of the scene when the guy is at the grave, when everybody leaves.
He's oscillating. He's getting...
Nishtahe, nishtaher, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It's sort of like this. Here, grab my hand. You go, grab my hand. You go, grab my hand. You go, right? So it's like, right, there's kind of ambivalence, right? What else? Agitation.
Lonely.
Well, we don't know that he's lonely. We know he's certainly chaotic. It's chaotic. He's terrified. It's terror. Now, you want to read the text here under transit stage 1, Chibuta Kever.
Rabbi Yehuda said, for 7 days, the soul goes to and fro from his house to his grave, and from his grave to his house, mourning for the body.
It's an interesting little factoid. How many of you heard Judaism has something to say about afterlife? We have no details. I find that a pretty interesting detail. For 7 days, the soul goes back and forth from its home to its grave, mourning for the body. What does that correspond with? The Shiva, the 7 days of communal mourning. So what Kabbalistic Judaism, as well as Rabbinic Judaism teaches, is that the first phase of the afterlife journey is a 7-day period of transition when the soul is potentially confused as to whether it's alive or dead. I say potentially because some people may exit more gracefully. Some people are able to go through life's changes and leave them go, and other people go through life's changes bitching and moaning. It may be that some souls are able to get out of here more gracefully and others hold on much more. And also when there's a sudden death, there may be more of a trauma for the soul. So I want to say something right now about the work of doing Chevra Kadisha work. If for 7 days the soul goes back and forth from its grave to its former home, mourning for the body, what that means is there's the possibility of some sense of presence that one might experience in the presence of a dead body. Now, I'm not saying you have to believe it or not believe it, but what I'm saying is that the afterlife teaching suggests to us being open to that possibility of some kind of almost indefinable sense of connection. And people have these incredible synchronistic experiences or visionary phenomena happen, and it's sort of noted cross-culturally that these things happen. You know, there are Hasidic rabbis who stop in the middle of praying and said, "Oh, Rabbi so-and-so just died." Right? Or, you know, I knew some rabbi who's running around preparing a funeral, and he's taking care of the family, he's taking care of the funeral directors, and all of a sudden an egg hits his windshield, and he felt like it was a message from the soul saying, "Hey, Shmegeg, don't forget about me also." You know, I was lecturing in Marietta, Georgia, and some woman came up to me and said, "My sister was murdered, and for 11 months she hung around the living room, and I was treated for a bereavement psychosis." You know, so the ghost phenomenon is Chibuta Kever. You know, I tell the tale, but I'll tell it quickly, of coming out of one of the gas chambers at Majdanek, which was really a pretty horrific place, and all of a sudden I started coughing and coughing and coughing and coughing and coughing, and I laid down, and it was a sunny day, and I'm going, go into the light, go into the light, go into the light, and all of a sudden it just stopped. And I felt that it was like this gnarled being that was caught up in between worlds in the gas chambers, and it had sort of latched onto me. And so this sense of some kind of presence is part of our Jewish understanding. The practical afterlife implications of that is the mindful attitude of doing the work around the dead body. That there's something very holy about being in the presence of a dead body. There's something about, almost as people describe, the kind of tenderness of caring for somebody who is basically lifeless and cold. And it's not only happening at a physical level. So it's also noting the kinds of conversations and thoughts and perceptions that go on. That Tahara is in itself a mindfulness practice. I can't say it any more clearly than that. And it's a hard practice, but it's also a mindfulness practice, and the willingness to share perceptions with each other as you're sort of downloading and processing when it's all over. Because again, the synchronicities around that, the meaningful coincidences, the light bulbs that flicker, all of those kinds of experiences ultimately point to the need to simply hold in the soul of the deceased in a loving way and say it's okay to go on and you're loved. It's okay to go on and you're loved. The morning correlate of the Chevra Kadisha, while the Chevra Kadisha is doing their work, the family is in a state called aninut. So we put up your hand if that's familiar to you. Okay, good. So it means for some of you folks you're learning a new word here. Aninut is, I call it a stage of hyperacute grief. It's the state in between the time of death and the time of burial. As a mourner, it's sort of like I feel like a zombie zone, right? And when I worked in a funeral home, when I first got my doctorate, my first job was a resident psychologist in a funeral home. And even though when people come home from the funeral, they light the Shiva candle, the funeral director I worked with would give people a yortzeit candle, which is actually a very memorial candle, and he would say, light this when you get home, and then tomorrow after the funeral you'll light the Shiva candle. And there's no halachic reason why one can't do it, and it gave people a kind of ritual frame. So I'll say to people in Aninut, what's the conversation in your heart and mind with the person who has died? Because that's such a vulnerable state. Particularly when it's a sudden death, people have a sense of like, I was in the middle of a sentence and they just disappeared. I never got to finish the sentence. So what I'll say to somebody is go sit quietly, light a candle, and just notice the conversation in your heart and in your mind. So there's the functional stuff of preparing for the funeral for the mourner. There's the functional stuff of the Chevra Kadisha practice for the members of the Chevra, but there's that little more difficult to define kind of process that goes on that goes on for people during that time. It's a liminal state that people are in, and to be aware of that. You can stop me with questions. I'm going to kind of, I have to speak quickly because we got to be done by 9, and I have to go through Gehenna. And if I leave you with being stuck in Gehenna and we didn't finish that, I'm screwed. I'm never going to get back to Boulder. I really like Boulder. Okay, so I want to make sure we do both the what and the so what as we go along. So I want to do some of the visionary phenomena that are noted in the text. Can somebody read Ancestral Guides, Familial Beings? It's on page 1.
Rabbi Shimon said, have you been today?
Have you seen
today the image of your father? For so we have learnt that at the hour of a man's departure from the world, his father and his relatives gather around him, and he sees them and recognizes them. and likewise all with whom he associated in this world. And they accompany his soul to the place where it is to abide.
Okay, somebody want to read the next one on the top of the next page. We'll do the ancestral beings and the mythic guides together.
No man dies before he sees the Shekhinah, and because of his deep yearning for the Shekhinah, the soul departs in order to see her. And with the Shekhinah, there come 3 ministering angels to receive the soul of the righteous. When a person departs this world, she or he sees many strange things on their way, and meets Adam, the first man, sitting at the gate of the Gan Eden, ready to welcome all who have observed the commandments of their master.
So there are 2 phenomena described here. There's the mommy and daddy, Babi Zaidi, grandparent, the familial beings, and people are dying in hospice. They're like totally out of it, and they say, "Oh, my sister's here, my sister's here." They run across the room, they strap him back into bed, give him Thorazine, and they die. I had a bereavement client who said she was sitting at the edge of her mother's bed. Her mother looks up and says, "Oh, my mother's here. Ma, I never introduced you to my daughter." The dying mother is introducing her deceased, her spirit vision of her mother to her daughter. So there's that level that's depicted in the literature, and then there's the mythic guides, and this stuff is parallel to near-death experience. So what I want to tell you is that the Hindus see Krishna, it's culturally determined also. The Hindus see Krishna, and the Buddhists see Buddha, and the Christians see Jesus, and the Jews see someone from the Federation. I need to tell you this quickly again because of time. I had an uncle. You see, we have a dearth of iconographic imagery. Here they have Shekhinah. Shekhinah, modern feminism, Jewish feminism notwithstanding, is not a woman with Birkenstocks and a tallis. Okay, you can check www.shekhinah.com, my wife's website, if you want to check that out. But that's not sort of traditional rabbinic understanding. In traditional rabbinic understanding, the Shekhinah is this luminescent presence. And there's all these angelic presences that also sort of show up. So here's the 3 ministering presences, 3 ministering angels. But we have a dearth of iconography. An uncle of mine had fled the Tsar's army. He came to Canada. He worked his butt off day and night. He was rapidly anti-religious. I once wanted to make a light Havdalah at his house, and he wanted to throw me out. I don't believe. Okay, I'll get out. I won't do it. So he said, he had a near-death experience. He said, Rabban Gamliel came and said, Yoine, it's not your time. His name was John, Yoine. So who shows up for him? Rabban Gamliel is a 2nd century rabbi that he had learned about in his Talmudic youth. So Jung would say there's an archetype and there's an archetypal image. So there seems to be an archetype of some kind of mythic guide helping people, and it's different than a familial being. Some people can get a familial being, other people, maybe they're transiting at a different level of the soul. I mean, it's a longer conversation about sort of the metaphysics of that. But the mythic guide seems to be culturally determined. So, you know who's showing up for kids today, kids in near-death experiences? Yoda. Because Yoda was an interdimensional being, and so some children are having that. So the practical application of this is honoring people's visionary phenomena on the deathbed. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work with the stages of dying is wonderful in describing the psychosocial context around dying, but it doesn't fully describe the transpersonal inner dimension of dying. Because I'm in Boulder, I have to do this other one here, the dissolution of elements. So, yeah.
Oh, just that I think it's just so beautiful. It says, because of its deep yearning for the Shekinah, the soul departs in order to see her. And I remember when my mom died, my sister and I couldn't imagine like anyone that she yearned for more than us. She just kind of completely was a martyr, gave herself away just for us. But when I remember reading this, it was so comforting because just to think that my mom had some other source that she was yearning for, that was maybe something like she yearned for her kids?
Well, that's why the smaller was helpful, because at the level of the personality, it's sort of the familiar and the familiar. But at the level of the soul, there's some other higher kind of knowing that calls the soul into its transition. So the dissolution of the elements. Jason, you want to read that, please?
Sure. We have learned that on the dread day, when a man's time comes to depart from the world, 4 quarters of the world indict him. Punishments rise up from all 4 quarters, and 4 elements fall, quarreling and seek to depart each to its own side.
So I read that and I say, what the hell is that? The ancestors, the mythic beings. I don't have here the life review, but the life review stuff is in there. I read this, so I have to go and read the Tibetan Book of the Dead. So when I read the Tibetan Book of the Dead, it talks about how there are 4 different elements, and with the dissolution of each element, there are what I would call subjective and objective variables. In other words, the subjective variables are what the dying person experiences. The objective variable are what somebody from the outside could see. So it goes like this. First, the element earth dissolves and is absorbed by the element water. This is accompanied by the inner experience that everything is falling apart from great floods and earthquakes. You will not be able to stand because your strength is fast disappearing. In the second phase, the element water dissolves and is absorbed by the element fire. You will experience the sensation that the entire universe has been flooded with water. During this time, those around you perceive your face and lips are rapidly drying up. You will also feel extremely thirsty. When the third element, fire, dissolves into the element air, you will experience the sensation that everything around you is burning. During this time, the heat from your body will go away. Finally, the element air will begin to dissolve into consciousness itself. When this happens, you will have the experience that all phenomena in the universe are being blown away by the winds of a great storm. You will hear a grinding roar like that of 1,000 thunders, and the external air or breath is extinguished. So then you go and work with somebody who's dying, and you notice that their limbs get very, they lifeless, and then they get totally thirsty. We used to have to give people ice chips, and then people get cold, and then there's no breath. And then I go back to reading, we have learned on the dread day when a man's time comes to depart from the world, 4 quarters of the world indict him, punishments rise up from all 4 quarters, and 4 elements fall, quarreling and seek to its own side. And then what did these guys know? There's still stuff they understand about the subjectivity of this process. Seems to be about the soul leaving the body that we haven't fully gotten in our medical technology. We're still in the early phases of evolving a spiritually based model of the dying process. We got the psychosocial better, but we don't have the transpersonal, if you will, or the soul dimension. And some of the esoteric writings suggest, we're going to know where the Reiki practitioners know, where you press on the body and what different color lights. And there seems to be some other whole process that goes on that our Western medicine hasn't fully gotten to understand. So the ritual application of this is honoring people's visionary phenomena. We go, hello, Mrs. Schwartz, what went into your body today? What came out of your body today? We don't enter into the conversation, but I noticed you were agitated and you seemed to be dreaming. Where'd you go? What was going on for you? So it's really helping people articulate or honoring what people are experiencing on the inner dimensions. The afterlife applications for working with hospice is really helping, is understanding that there's some other soul process going on. I also have on the list here the Vidui, the deathbed confession. Deathbed confession, by the way, is not only the prerogative of priests on late night movies. Okay? That Judaism has a Vidui. There's actually a couple of interesting websites that do. We're starting to reclaim it. But the Vidui is really helping the soul leave the body. The work of the Chevra Kadisha is helping the soul leave the body. The very early phases. The funeral. Okay? We're such a worried people. We're such a worried people. All our liturgy and that I encourage people to have silence during the funeral. I say, we all remember, Zadie Mitchell, and so everybody, I'd like you all have a memory of him. This is my father-in-law. He was a very charismatic guy. So you all have some memory of him. So I want to invite you to allow that memory to come into your mind. And hold that in your heart. And imagine saying to him that we're sending you off on your journey in a loving way. And then I hold the silence for 15, 20 seconds. And all of a sudden what we're doing at the funeral is we're setting the soul on the journey. And I'm taking this notion that there's some kind of transitional phase that goes on after death, and we're doing that. And in the Shiva house, it's like, well, never mind. For the sake of time, I won't tell you this one. But the Shema, Hear, O Israel, the Lord of God. So we sit before the Shema and say, what have you been hearing? And we invite, what have you been hearing? What's the connection? And people will often share, I feel like so-and-so is moving on, or he's feeling feeling loved by our presence here today. I don't know exactly it happens that way. Right? I want to say this to the scientists in the house. It doesn't have to be literal for the metaphor to work. I think, so if it works for you in a literal way, great. And if it doesn't, but it works in a metaphoric way, the bottom line is we have these teachings in Jewish tradition, and in a sense that Judaism doesn't have a belief in afterlife has robbed us of a certain kind of spiritual attitude to take into our rituals. And it's not a very hard and fast formula, but there are a lot of little tweaks, if you will, that we can use in some of our different kind of rituals. One more, and then I got to get you in and out of Gehenna in the next 7 minutes, so we've got to do that one, right? At the end of the Shiva, what do you do at the end of Shiva?
Walk outside.
Why? Walk outside, what else? You don't just walk outside.
Take a walk.
You take a walk. Why do you walk around the block?
Why?
Yeah.
To get back into life.
Right, and you need a diet, but that's a different conversation, right? So on the psycho-emotional level, it's saying we've taken this time at a time and we're going to walk around the block. But on the spiritual level, for 7 days the soul goes back and forth from its grave to its former home, and now it's saying, we've been with you this long, and now we take you and you're walking on your journey. And it's also walking the soul on its journey. So this one I got from my wife, Vila Rezos. She said, we're going to walk around the block, and I know I'm walking my father off, but it says, Jacob says he was gathered to his ancestors. So who are the people to whom my father has been gathered? And so we went around the room, and some people knew his own, my father-in-law's mother, and sometimes there was some friends in our community, and there was all of a sudden a sense that we were the sending off party, but there was another whole welcoming party. And so again, the ritual, the ways these ideas renew our rituals. Yeah, that's an easy one to use. That's very poignant. Yeah, please.
Quick question. Making the 7-day point. Many families don't do the 7 days. They do something shorter. What's the implication of that? The
implication of that is 3-day Shiva is an oxymoron. Right? So what I say to people is, listen, if your life is such that you can't sit Shiva for 7 days, at least be aware that there's a kind of vulnerable process that goes on, and find your way to honor the process. That one of the problems is that people rush back in and they sort of want to sanitize their emotions, and the Jewish wisdom is counter. It's in a way it's contraindicated. America was founded by New England Protestant tradition, which is not a very how would I say it with all due respect? Because I said last night something that people got a little pissed off at. I said the Puritans are the Taliban of England. But let's just say that there's a certain kind of discomfort emotionality that we've inherited as part of the American Protestant culture. And Judaism has much more of an appreciation, if you will, of the vicissitudes of life and death. And our ritual, we say Yizkor, the memorial prayer, during the season of our holy days. We go before the Rosh Hashanah, before the New Year, we go to the cemetery to commune with the deceased, to visit ancestors. So my sense is that we need to try to create communities where we understand the spiritual efficacy and the psychological function of Jewish rituals. Okay, I obviously could say a lot more, and I want to say something about Gehenna. Eventually, the body leaves go of its, the soul leaves go of its attachment to the physical body, it dissipates, and then there's something called Gehenna. Gehenna is purgatory, but it's not sort of hell in the same way. It's more like this. It's a chance to process all of the incomplete emotions that exist. So if somebody comes up and smacks me in the face and kicks me in the shins, I can so be right. And then you come up, it's my friend Joe, and you come up to me 6 months later and you say, "Hey, whatever happened to your friend Joe?" And I say, "Joe, I killed the guy. I'm out there. I tell you what happened." What's the point? Is that emotions persist long after the initial point of contact. And we can have a variety of emotions. You can have a fight with your significant other or with a friend, and then in the morning you wake up, the alarm goes off, you grab your coffee. Oh, I understand in Boulder you only drink tea. You drink your tea, and then later in the day it shows up as a backache because you feel unsupported. It shows up as a pain in your neck because that person's a pain in the neck, or your stomach hurts because you can't stomach it any longer. Or Louise Hay says you get a bladder infection because you're pissed off. So we know psychosomatic medicine teaches us that the body holds those emotions, and if you did an x-ray, you'd see my bone structure. If you did an MRI, you'd see my tissue structure. If you did an emotiogram, you could see here's where we hold the anger, and here's where we hold the grief, and here's where we hold the shame. We hold that. What would it be post-mortem that you lift up the rug and you have to deal with all of the unresolved SH in life? So that's how the rabbis, and certainly how the Kabbalists understood Gehenna. It was the equivalent of the fourth step, the fearless moral inventory. So who feels particularly Shakespearean? I need somebody to read the Gehenna text. Yeah, please. Give us a little bit of drama on it.
There are 5 kinds of punishment in Gehenna, and Isaiah saw them all. He entered the second compartment, and he saw 2 men hanging by their tongues. And he said, "Oh, you who unveils the hidden, reveal to me the secret of this." He answered, "These are the men who slandered, therefore they are thus punished." He entered the third compartment, and he saw there men hanging by their organs. He said, "Oh, you who unveils the hidden, reveal to me the secret of this." And he answered, "These are the men who neglected their own wives and committed adultery with the daughters of Israel."
Okay, we can go on the road together, actually. So this is a very good text for pedagogical purposes. It's lousy for pastoral. Okay? This is like the Jewish Dante material. Okay? But here, first of all, this is a genre of literature midah keneged midah. The punishment fits the crime. You sin with your tongue, you hang from your tongue. You sin with your sexual organs, you hang from your sexual organs. But here's the deal. Teachings in religious literature are metaphoric, not literal. Okay? The fundamentalists want to have you believe that it's very literal, but it's metaphoric. So it goes like this. What would it be to have an honest self-encounter where you look at yourself in the mirror unadorned and you have to deal with all of the times that you shot from the lip and were verbally abusive to people you loved? It might feel like hanging from the tongue. What would it be to have to deal with all of the times you acted with impropriety in your intimate relationships and hurt other people? It might feel like hanging from, So all of a sudden what we see here in Gehenna are images of, like I said, the fearless moral inventory of honest self-encounter. The old metaphors are of the penal colony, medieval torture. And I know it's medieval torture because I've seen it because I raised 2 kids in the same household. So I've actually seen that, right? But the new metaphors are rehab. The image of Gehenna is not penal colony. It's rehab. It's really looking at, you know, it's doing stuff in therapy. People have stuff in therapy, and it feels like hell. It feels like they're hanging from their tongue. It feels like whatever. So Gehenna is this kind of very honest encounter. Now, here's the thing: if Kibbutz Chevra corresponds with Shiva, Gehenna corresponds with Kaddish. And our act of saying Kaddish redeems the souls from Gehenna. For you women. So the son gets up, it's the first day. I do it as a father and a son, but you can do it anyway. And says saying Kaddish for his father. Kaddish is a memorial prayer that an orphan will say for 11 months for a father. Why do we say it 11 months? What's the maximum length of time in Gehenna? 12. Why do we say it for 11 months?
Because our parents really aren't that bad, so we only need to do
Now, I have therapy clients who said my parents should get 24 to 36 years. So, guy comes to synagogue, Yid Kadal, Yid Kadash, you son of a bitch. You didn't leave a life insurance policy. You like to work more than your kids. And now I have to say these stupid words that don't say anything about Gehenna. That don't say anything about death. So the response comes back and says, you were a pain in the ass. You were not an easy kid to raise. You were always running around with your friends. You never had to, you know, like you didn't make my life easy. Right? And it's 3 months. You know, Kadal, Kadash. You know what, Dad? You know what I realized today? I didn't even know you. I had no idea who you were. And the response comes back and says, you know what? I didn't know me either. What did I know? I got married when I was 21. I had my kids when I was 22. I've had a few months here since I died to sort of think about it, and I realized that I didn't know me at all. Right? Then it's 5 months. It's 7 months. You know what, Dad? I really, really miss you. I really, really miss you. Today, that's just what I'm feeling. And the response comes back and says, you know, I really, really miss you. I really missed you. There were a lot of chances that I could have been more present for you, and I missed you, and I'm really, really sorry. 8 months, 9 months, Kadal, Kadash. You know what, Dad? We never said in our family, I love you. We never said I love you. And it's just been really hard here. The response comes back and says, look, I love you. Yeah, I'm sorry that I never said it, but absolutely, I love you all along. I just never knew how to say it. It's the last day of St. Kaddish, right? You know what, Dad? I've been angry. I've missed you, but you know what? The bottom line is that I love you and I forgive you. And the response comes back and says, listen, I bless you, I love you, and take what you can from what I gave you, and let the rest go. And I bless you. And the year of Kaddish is over. And is that a process of redeeming the souls from Gehenna? I don't know, but damn, it's helpful to know, for people to understand that the conversation of consciousness between the living and the dead continues. That's the important piece. I'm not selling Afterlife, but I'm selling the awareness of the continuity of consciousness can be meaningful for some of us in our heart. And if it works for you, fine. Be more attuned to those kind of synchronicities. I went to say Kaddish, both my parents died on December 29th, but 9 years apart. I mean, that's a very interesting story how that happened. My mother said to my brother, what day is it? He said, it's one of, no, she went in the hospital on 28th. She said, what time is it? He says, it's 1 in the morning. She said, you know what day it is today, don't you? And then she was dead 2 hours later. She was very self-assertive in her life, and similarly, yeah. So I think this Gehenna text and the connection of Gehenna with Kaddish suggests something that's very, very helpful for us in dealing with the work of bereavement. Okay, the rabbis actually said much more about Gehenna than they did about Gan Eden, because they used Gehenna as a carrot and a stick. They said, you know how you avoid the torments of Gehenna? Do mitzvahs. Get involved with the Chevra Kadisha training. There's a training to be able to sign up here a little bit late. Please take care of that. It would help you do mitzvahs and avoid the torments of Gehenna. Eventually, this part of the journey ends, and another part unfolds that we call Gan Eden, the heavenly Garden of Eden. And this is where the neshama, the higher mind, if you will, the higher aspect of the soul, perceives the grander reality of the divine. So that's the heavenly stuff, right? So for the rabbis, it was described as sitting around all day and studying Torah, and the women were serving them. Right? In my book, I have a chapter on the realms of the 7 women, of the 7 realms of the women in Gan Eden. So there are 7 realms in Gan Eden, and the realm that one not acquires, but I guess merits, is contingent upon how one has grown and evolved spiritually. Like, how much money have you put into your Gan Eden account? So are you only going to be able to afford a Motel 6? Are you going to be able to have a Hilton? Or a penthouse apartment overlooking the Rockies? Right? So this notion that there's this kind of transcendent realm of Gan Eden, the rabbis talked about the connection with Yortzeit, the anniversary of a death. They would say at the time of a death, you say, the neshama zol haben and aliyah, the soul should ascend higher and higher. As if to say, our remembering the deceased helps their soul ascend higher and higher. One last piece, and then I'm going to shut up. I don't know if I'll get a few more minutes for the questions. For some places, the Gan Eden is the end of the journey. Or the rabbis didn't have to standardize belief. They had to standardize practice. So it didn't matter. Some believe this, some believe that. In other places, there's another realm called Sror HaChayim. I translate it as the source of life. It's sort of said to be a holding tank for souls underneath the throne of God. It's sort of mission control for souls. So I corresponded with Yitzker because there's a sense of like, a woman comes to synagogue and she prays to her mother, Ma, can I have, help me have a child? And the woman shows up the next year and she has a child who looks a little bit like the deceased grandmother. Because in this realm, the deceased, the souls of the deceased act as intercessors in our lives. There's a Yiddish phrase, they should be for you a guter beter, a good arbiter. That the grandmothers and the parents and the teachers can act and it's sort of bodhisattva-like intercessors. I need a dollar bill, or somebody have a honey. Yeah, a pen. But when I was in high school, I would go out on a date, and my father would slip me 5. So it was the last day I was saying Kaddish for my father, and it was also his birthday. And I got out of my van at Starbucks, and there on the ground was a $10 bill. So I got a raise, right? A couple of months ago, I told the story in Ohio on Friday night, and on Saturday morning, some guy comes up and says, "Your father's been around. I just found the $10 bill." We'll give it to Tzedakah. So the sense is that on one hand the soul is giving up its attachment to the physical body or working out its unresolved emotional karma, if you will, or perceiving the infinite. And then in the highest realm, the soul is available as an intercessor. And then it brings in the whole notion of reincarnation, but we have to do that for next year's lecture. So to end, and then we'll see whether we've got to pull the plug right away or not. Between this world and the world beyond, there's a window and not a wall. And once we start with that assumption, that changes the way in which we think about our Jewish ritual practices.
Thank you.
I've always thought about Gehenna as being a time where, as we review what happened in our lives and we realize some of the things that were not so good, the kind of regret that we feel that we can't make amends is what is Gehenna. That's what we suffer. That there's no way we can undo the lousy things we did anymore. And I guess it's a way of
helping us to think every day, every Thursday night, every Rosh Chodesh or whatever, what did I do that I want to make amends of for now, instead of waiting for that time? And if there are things that you did to someone who's already gone, then it's really hard to make amends. But that, to me, would be Gehenna.
Well, it's sort of, I'm just writing a Gehenna text with the supervising angel of Gehenna making you recite the serenity prayer over and over again, which is, God help me accept the things I cannot change, and the courage to change things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. And so when you can accept with a certain sense of equanimity our failings and our losses and the grief, and see that as part of just the very destiny of being imperfect human beings. Yeah, I mean, I say to my kids, at the end, after having me as a father is a pain in the ass with my kids. used to take my son out and we would do a whole ritual just to bury a goldfish. Like we do a whole big thing. But I say, after I'm gone, I just hope you can say, I was an imperfect human being who tried to do better every single day. And I think that helps to avoid the pangs of Gehenna, of the guilt, of the shame, of the sense of failure. Yeah, please.
My question is one of the last points that you addressed, the soul as the intercessor. If you could say a little bit more about what that might be, what would prompt a soul to intercede?
It seems to be that after the soul works out its personality, karma, if you will, to schlep a term from another culture, right? That the soul, we seem to incarnate in soul pods. In Gan Eden, the soul it's not just a monadic soul there, but the soul is part of a collective grouping. So there's like a Hadassah room, and right, there seems to be familial pattern. So it seems to be, at least as I read the text, that karmically souls hold some kind of responsibility for other incarnate souls. Like my wife went to see a psychic after her father died, and he, through the psychic, said that like one of his tasks was to watch over my son. Like he's sort of there to watch over him in a certain kind of way. And at least as far as I understand, there seem to be those kind of souls. And it is hardwired in Jewish tradition. You see it in the Fiddler on the Roof. What's her name? From Sarah is she's the women. There's all these like early modern, late medieval texts of prayers to the deceased, particularly around marriage and pregnancy. A lot of the European women's literature pointed to that. So it seems to be that there are ancestors who are available to guide. When they incarnate, I don't know. But at least to say that notion is there in the tradition. So I think that the take home on that is, who are the people who you feel are like watching over you, and what are your prayers to them? People say, how do you get new clients? I advertise, but I usually get more clients around the time of my father's yahrzeit and my father-in-law's yahrzeit. My father-in-law say, you're okay, but you need to make more money. So I say, okay, so send me some more clients.
These are the normative traditions, but what about people who return to Judaism and when their parents died, when their child died, they didn't have these?
Well, look, in terms of sort of adopting Judaism, to understand that these rituals are there as an available database. Retroactively, I think the souls are in their own kind of incarnational journey, and there are guides, and there are transitional beings, and there are helpers available, and they don't necessarily have a kind of faith-based calling card. So these are there within the context of contemporary Jewish community life, but that doesn't mean that other souls might transmigrate or find ways of doing completion. And I mean, look, what's a memorial mass if not a kind of way of freeing up the soul? So other traditions have those. Can the souls do it unaccompanied? I have a sense that they can. There's a rabbinic text that I found about how there's an angel who teaches Torah to infants, to children who died in their mother's womb, which I found fascinating as somebody who experienced my partner having miscarriage, right, which is really an invisible kind of grief, that the men were writing these texts. It meant they knew that this was going on. That was their way of trying to understand it. So I think souls, there's a whole, what would I say? There's a lot of resources available out there. Yeah, please.
I was thinking there's a valuable parallel with this model in terms of kind of consciousness in this world, life in this world. Like the story of the Baal Shem Tov, where some of his students were making fun of the more ignorant people, and he had them close their eyes, and they were transported to a different level where they were actually tearing apart the people, not just speaking about them. So the sense that there's different reverberations of all these levels in terms of what we do in this world as it affects people who are actually living on different dimensions.
I mean, the bottom line is what's the quality of life that we're living here? I mean, that really is what I think the implication is. That there's a rabbinic teaching. Let me see if I can get it. It sort of goes like this. Actually, hang on. Let me find it, because it's really worth getting it right, even if it takes a minute or three longer to get to it. Okay. One of the rabbis said, better is 1 hour of bliss in the world to come. That's the rabbinic term, world to come. Better is 1 hour of bliss in the world to come than the whole of life in this world. Then you get one that says, better is 1 hour of repentance and good works in this world than the whole of life in the world to come. So it's the same rabbi who said that. So there's this that's kind of like a Zen koan, right? So it's this juxtaposition between the supernal realm and the human realm. And in some ways, the rabbis never said that this is better than this. It's really that we live in a kind of correlative relationship between both. Yeah, I always like that. Please.
So I was here for a while, and it feels different in every room, and sometimes it feels... Yes, I've been sitting for a while, and Shemira for a while, and it feels different in every room, and sometimes there's a different emotional charge in a room, and I'm wondering if you have some advice on how to work with that.
Well, look, different souls have different dramas. I remember when my friend Chaim Rothstein, Alav Shalom, died, I set up the Shmira for like 24 hours. And everybody had different kinds of experiences. And at one point I felt like he said, here, simply, you think afterlife is this? And he taught me some whole other way. And I think the attitude is one of simply receptivity. I mean, that's what we want to cultivate. There's not a template, and there's not a paradigm. People live differently, and people die differently, and people transition differently. So there's not like, oh, that's a 7 out of 10, and this is only a 4 out of 10. It's rather, this is the way that it is, and each one is different, and each one is its mystery. And just like some people you meet, and they're like really energetic, and you really get a good vibe of them, and other people it's like they leave and you have no idea who they, you forgot the next day that you even met that person and left no impression on you. So you'll get all kinds of those souls, and I think it's a sense of simply being in your own heart and trusting your own experience, and not having expectations. I think so. It's lowering expectations and raising receptivity. Yeah, I think that. Yeah.
So that reminds me of sometimes we've had an experience at Taharat where the face changes between the beginning and the end. And it's like, are we talking ourselves into the fact that this face relaxed more? Is it physical, or did the soul really relax the face because of the...
Well, consciousness is leaving, like the consciousness doesn't leave the body like that. it is a slower process. So I mean, I don't know, but given that rigor mortis may have set in, and the face, I don't know. It makes it.
It's more like the opposite. The face seems.
It relaxes. Yeah.
But we see. It's almost like we see peacefulness, or.
I'm sure.
Sometimes I go. Imagine it.
Well, no. You're seeing. You're seeing that. And I was with some woman in hospice, and she was clearly in a coma. And so my hospice narrative was doing a little bit of chanting, and it's okay whenever you're ready, or your family's going to be okay, and you've done the best you can, and you're loved, and you're not going to be alone. Because I know about these guides who say you're not going to be alone. And then I did the Vidui, which is the deathbed confession, and the Shema. And the slight, and I'm holding her hand, and the slightest sense with her nails, she kind of like just moved, as if to say like, I got it. And I left, and then 2 hours later she had died. So so there is some sense of an interconnectivity of worlds that's hard to explain. We may one day develop the technology of perception to be able to see what happens with the soul. Carillion photography and things like that are moving in that direction. Yeah, please.
Simcha, thank you so profoundly. So good to hear these things again. I guess my question is, what would be your eitzah, your advice for this beloved Chevra Kadisha to keep flourishing, to keep growing and attracting new people? What since you've been around the block many times?
Well, I think the sense of I heard myself say it for the first time tonight, that to really hold that Chevra Kadisha is a mindfulness practice. If you really make that bottom line, then that will determine how you're going to do your training and how you're going to do your preparation. Because it's very easy to like grab a Taco Bell and run in to make it on time to Tahara. And maybe you need an agreement that we at least do 10 minutes of sitting practice before we even start at Tahara, and we do 10 minutes of sitting practice. It's done, and that people try to take on some kind of practice, and to also it would be interesting to keep a log of these kind of narrative stories. See, I think in 19 you talk about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in 1900. Sigmund Freud wrote The Interpretation of Dreams, and that begins a whole process of cultural transformation of attitudes towards human sexuality. And he was very intentional about publishing it in 1900. And Lord knows it's 115 years, 114 years, and we're still working on that one. Right? In 1969, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross writes on death and dying, and that really begins a whole process of cultural transformation of attitudes towards death and dying. And we're only, 44, 45 years into it, is my math right? Right? So we're still in the very early stages of a broader cultural transformation around dying and death. And the hospice movement and the right to die movement, and there's a national Chevra Kadisha movement. I don't know if anybody's going, but there's a conference in Miami in a couple of weeks. The Kavod V'Nichum, are you involved with Kavod V'Nichum? It would be good to at least, find out what they're doing and look at Jewish-funerals.org. They have a very extensive website, and children involved in death, and the difference between Princess Diana's funeral and Jackie Kennedy's funeral. So there's a whole kind of culture shift happening. Just let me finish this because I have ADD and I forget. Right. So I want to say you're all harbingers of the new vision. And the conversations you have with each other in community and that you have with your families are really promulgating this new emerging vision that we can take death out of the closet, that we can make it simply part of the landscape of human life. And you know about the death cafes?
Yeah.
Death cafes, have new death cafes in Philadelphia.
We have death cafes, we just started here.
Yeah, which is simple, it's fantastic. Coffee, cake, and conversations about death, period. No, you know, and the conversations people have. So that's all part of what's going on. One more question, and then I think I'll put it.
So I have two experiences. One was we were doing Tahara, and the sun arrived, and it was disturbing, and he stayed. And then my other comment, and then I wanted, if you have comments about it, was someone came up to me and said, I heard you did Tahara for my son. And that also took me back.
Well, look, you have to find your way to say, like people come up to me and say, I hear so-and-so is a client of yours. And I'm not allowed to agree with that. I say, like it's great, it's wonderful that I can be of help to people. So it's not bragging. I don't know. I'm trying to think about how to answer that, but it's like Baruch Hashem. That's it. That's all you need to say. Baruch Hashem. Yeah.
So I really want to be clear for all of us about the rules of confidentiality around Tahara, especially if it's an immediate family member who are maybe inquiring and interested in the process of this magical resting of the soul, or maybe a peacefulness, which some of us have seen that comes over.
I want to refer you to my colleague and friend David Zinner, who does the Kavod V'Nichum, who really gets the whole process around Tahara much more than I do. So I actually want to end. David Zinner, and the Z-I-N-N-E-R, and the organization is Kavod, K-A-V-O-D, V'Nichum, and it's Jewish-funerals.org. So here's what I want to say. To end, my Auntie Rose says the following. She says, everyone has their expiry date tattooed on their body. She says, mine is on my ass, I can't see it, and I don't worry about it. To which I say to her, it's a good thing, because if you could see your ass from behind, you would drop dead. So honoring my aunt, I want to recognize that we're all dealing with the reality of human mortality. Even in Boulder, and none of us getting out of here alive. So the real implication in all of this is that we live our lives with a quality of integrity, with the right balance between gravity and levity, which I think I've tried to share with you tonight, and with a sense of open-heartedness. And our hope is that will allow us to live a better death and to live a more meaningful life. So again, my thanks to Jason and to all of you who have invited me here, and kol hakavod to what you're doing with the Kadisha.